I just got a note. Doug will be with us shortly.
Okay, good. Well, did anybody other than Tom have a chance to look at the last draft or before, what you talked about last meeting?
Yes, I did.
Any comments?
No, I thought everything was good.
Feels like it's coming together, and some questions that I know you have is how is this going to work in practice? And we might just have to trust the process at this point because, your developers are going to come up with some interesting projects and they're going to apply these. I feel the principles are sound, and soundly explained, and
Yeah.
The board's going to have a big responsibility, and the execution is going to make it effective, so.
Yeah.
We considered some kind of a training or something for, say, the ECB and other boards or committees that might be reviewing this kind of, like the Ag Committee would be reviewing it if it has to do with ag land. Are we considering that at all?
Well, we had the NRI training, which, kind of gives you the frame of mind to look at these things creatively.
Uh-huh.
I think really it's just a matter of sitting with it. But,
Okay.
if you set something up, I could help with it.
I was thinking about the ECB. Of course, I always think about the ECB, but just because there may be some members on other committees that are not familiar with what the process is about conservation, subdivision design, and how that works and what their responsibility is, and just the whole process about how that's all.
Yeah, no, it's important for everybody to know what their roles are and how they can help.
Yeah.
I think the ECB really, the planning board needs to, understand these computations, the procedures and all that. But what they're relying on the ECB for is, what are the resources that are important? How can they be best protected? And those specifics, like if you have a rare, ecological community, you'd say this has to be protected. It has to be buffered. There has to be this much around it. You don't want to disturb this and that, because those are the specifics that would go into the individual conservation easement. For each resource, it's a little different. If it's adjoining a farm field, say the parcel is split in half, and half of it's a farm field that's going to be active farming, your protections will be different. You'll say, keep a vegetated buffer, keep a row of trees, maybe even have a fence so people don't wander into the field and pick things. There might be different protections for different resources. So, that's the important role of the ECB. It's like, this is the area to protect, and this is how you should delineate it. And, don't budge on that, or, I've seen some proposals. It's like, oh, we're going to preserve 5 acres of farmland over in the corner over here. Well, is that effective? Those are the questions, that you need to push back on the developer. If they propose a certain layout and that resource isn't going to be protected in that manner, with that layout, that's where you say, draw it this way, this isn't acceptable because of the resource, and really focus on the resource. So the ECB doesn't, the planning, you need to, you can read it and figure out how many units and you can see how they're doing that. But the layout is really going to be the important thing, and making sure it's respectful of the resources and protected. Yeah. And then to make sure that follows through. And I did pull together some sample easements from the town of Victor, because we do, work for the town of Victor. And, it's going to be site specific. They have some standard language, but when there's a important resource on the site, you have to be very specific, and just, it's a simple thing on the easement. Maintain a vegetated buffer. Don't take out any trees unless, it's for safety purposes, things like that. So, yeah, but I'd be happy to put my 2 cents in if you have a training program. I'd be happy to participate in that.
I think it's an excellent idea, Joyce. Really, in order to have a common approach, what Barbara just said, to have that stated to the various groups at the same time, I think would be very good to, send that message that this is a departure from what we've done. And, to get that seed planted so that it grows properly. I think it would be a great idea to have that kind of, training session. And it'd be fantastic to have Barbara participate in it and, give her 2 cents, maybe all the way up to a dime, something like that.
Yeah, I would agree, Terry. I think everybody on the same page, no matter what kind of new material we produce, and any other committee is always good to make sure everybody understands where the town's going.
Present that same page to everybody at the same time.
Well, why don't I walk through the changes from the last meeting, because there are just a few, and I appreciate Tom's time and reading through it and asking for, there was some consistency corrections, and I tried to explain things more clearly, but let me walk through that so I can share my screen, correct? Try that. Should be old hat at this by now. Okay. All right.
You should be able to, Neil Barb. Go ahead.
All right. You see that? Draft regulations?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so just gonna, well, that's not really a big change, so. We
Barbara,
tried,
really, the things that I suggested are not a big deal. They're just clarifications.
yes, a lot of them were, you use
Right.
this term in one section and a different term in another section, so we made those consistent. But I tried to clarify this in G, conservation standards, how to determine that 40% of the parent parcel, which is this red box, excluding the constrained and unbuildable land, which is this blue area, needs to be 40%. So this would be this purple area. So we just tried to make that clear. So you divide the land to be preserved minus the blue, and that's the denominator. Well, by the total number, yeah, so the area to be preserved in purple minus the blue over the parcel size minus the blue. I don't know a better way to explain that. People are just going to have to walk through it on their own. And I think that was the only real modification that was other than just references that were corrected, and make sure that the the references to different sections were corrected. So I think it's ready. I feel that's ready to go to the next step, unless anybody else has some thoughts now that you see it, that you've had some more time.
No.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. The other thing we talked about at the last meeting was some easements. So I just wanted to share what let me pull a couple of these up. So Quail Ridge. Fern Creek, I'll open all of these up, but. Okay, share. Did I share that? Okay, okay.
Not yet.
Okay, here we go. So this is Lehigh Crossing. Victor's got a nice GIS mapping thing that you can use with Google Earth, so you can just point at things. So this is just a 4-acre easement. It's behind some houses, but it does have some properties. So let me find that easement. I gotta open it again. Okay. All right. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, crossing. Okay. Oh, okay. Right, you see that Lehigh Crossing easement? Okay. So this, is a typical language of an easement. It tells, but the requirements are, you can't change the topography, you can't fill, dredge, or divert waterways. You can't remove any vegetative material. You can't store any equipment or building supplies there. You can't increase the amount of impervious surfaces, apply pesticides, clear brush. And there's an exception if there's some dead wood in there, you can remove that. Obviously, this is an agricultural easement that might be subject to ag and markets protection, but you can't put livestock there or cultivate the soils. It's a natural resource easement. We look at one more. Let's see, this one is Quail Ridge. This is a little bigger. Can you see that, Quail Ridge?
Yes.
Oh, good. And the easement for that one says, very similarly, you can't store things, you can't landscape with impervious surfaces, you can't build any structures, use pesticides, livestock, use any motor vehicles, all-terrain vehicles or snowmobiles. I don't think that was in the other one.
Mm-hmm.
So Barbara, is each agreement separately developed to address that particular easement area that's being covered? Is that how that works?
So the town of Victor has two generic types of easements. They call them least restrictive and most restrictive, actually. And then they have some that are site specific. So they do have some models that they rely on and repeat a lot of the language. And I'll forward these to you for your use. But they do have to be customized, obviously. And that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. You have to look at the land and the area. So this, if you see, I'll try to zoom in. Oops, sorry. Zoom in a little if I can. Here we go. It's a small area. So this is 3 acres, but it adjoins some woodlands, obviously. So, there's some sensitivities there. And the purpose is to protect those sensitive features, whether they're slopes or woods. So there's models, but they still have to be customized, every one of them. And then it becomes a legal document when it's once it's filed with the county clerk. It's part of the deed.
And so you, Barb, you would foresee the planning board or the planner actually, or I don't know who, as staff, developing that and the planning board having a final say over that? Or is this strictly what our lawyer would do? Or how does that process actually work? And what would be the responsibility of the planning board during this whole thing?
So the easement, the way it's written in, they take it directly from the minutes of the meeting. And what the ECB, I don't know if they call it that in Victor, but tells them is a requirement of the approval. So, it's in the planning board's approval of the subdivision. It's like, okay, it's approved, but in this easement area, these are the restrictions. And that becomes part of the record when the planning board approves the development proposal. And then it's the responsibility of the lawyer for the town to make sure that gets put in the easement exactly the way it was approved by the planning board.
Okay,
But that would be a condition of
Yep.
approval issued by the planning board.
Right, and so the
Okay.
record of that would be in the minutes, you
Right,
know, in the written record of approval.
right.
Let me look at one more for you.
But would the planning board in setting that condition of approval, would they delineate specific requirements within that easement that
Well, yeah, they can be as specific as necessary. You know, before they get to the language of the easement, the delineation of the area, that's obviously critical.
yeah,
And that's in the plat itself, in the development proposal, but then the language of the easement. This is another example of a most restrictive easement. So it's, this one's 54 acres, so this one's substantial. And to look at the language for that. Open that up. You know, some of it's the same. Don't change the topography, don't move vegetation, don't store vehicles, don't build structures, don't clear brush, don't have livestock or agriculture. So this one is, again, it's a model. They obviously use this one model and they didn't really change it. And that's this one, I think, right? Oops, that's not that one. It's not that one either. Third time's the charm. Shoot. There it is again. So this is their generic most restrictive easement, and that was the language that we just went over. So it's not really complicated, but again, you know, the site specific provisions, you know, are important to get right. And you know, we can walk you through example upon example, but you know, it's not real until it's a real project and you have everybody, you know, weighing in, including, you know, the developer and the neighbors and so forth. There's certainly a lot to coordinate.
these most restrictive and least restrictive that you mentioned, Barbara, are they something that was drafted by people in Victor, or is this some language that came from some generic site, or?
I think they probably worked it out themselves over time.
Okay,
They seem like a good model for you. And
Yeah.
you know, feel free to, you know, use it. I don't think it's, you know, it's public use at this point, you know, so.
Yeah. no
Hey,
point in
Barb.
reinventing the wheel.
Right.
Barb, I wanted to ask you a question along the same lines. Are you guys as Labella providing this service for Victor? Because I see even like, for instance, you have all these conservation easements mapped and these terms. Is that something that you guys are doing for them?
The mapping project was something the town embarked upon and actually hired Labella to do. They have their own kind of GIS package. I mean, they use Encore, but they also, well, they had Labella basically research all of the conservation easements that have ever been filed and create this guide map. So it was quite a project, but it was a kind of a project they embarked upon and hired us to do, in addition to their, you know, Labella's role as being the town engineer and staff and support for the planning board.
So I guess I have a question for the project team here. I mean, this is, the legislation itself is one thing, and that's all great, but then there's this ongoing piece that even Joyce was alluding to earlier, and how do we think that we're going to incorporate that in our current operations? I mean, it's one thing to have the planning board make it a condition of approval, but we have to have somebody that has the knowledge to help pull this stuff together and then essentially monitor it also.
Yeah, that's right. I think the town has some work to do before we can actually move through this like holistically. I'm just talking about all the conservation easements that we have. Where are they? Do we know where they are? Have we listed them? What kind of agreements do we have with the, owners of the property at this time, or, how that all works? This kind of leads us, we've accomplished one thing here and that's great, but it certainly opens the door for some other things that we haven't quite got our hands around yet. And I'm wondering if the conservation easement team wouldn't be responsible, or the CIC basically, to move this piece of that forward, trying to produce something like this so that we know where our easements are, not just new easements coming up, but old easements, and then developing, some kind of template that the planning board could work with.
Well, this also ties into ongoing conversation that pops up every once in a while relative to the other conservation easements and
That's
how
what
we do those. And I know that Chuck on more than one occasion has asked me, does the town want to hold the conservation easements? And I guess my response is, I think that ship has already sailed when we started going down the road with the PDRs, and we're required to hold an easement now.
Yeah.
But we've got to kind of still go back and formalize that process, and that piece we're still missing.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm referring to in part by saying, does the CIC want to, develop or something the next step? Do we want to take responsibility for the next step, or recommend to the town board that next step be taken? Because I don't see it specifically mentioned in the goals of the comprehensive plan, but in order to make this, a very holistic operation, you kind of have to do that piece. We have to gather all of our easements and see where we are with all of that.
So Joyce, you're talking about mapping the current.
Yes, I'm talking
easements.
about mapping our current easements, just like we see here.
I absolutely agree with you. I don't see how we can go forward without knowing what we already have.
We're going into a next step, by producing something that's going to be used by developers as they come in the future. We don't even, we don't have our past kind of in place yet. So
I thought Eric mapped all the easements when he was working on the comprehensive plan. Don't we have a map that shows all the PDRs?
Wow, that'd be great.
Yes, we have a map that shows all the PDRs, but currently none of those easements are maybe just, I don't know, they're mostly the Finger Lakes Land Trust, but I mean, we have a lot more easements than that, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
So that's not a complete easement map. That's just specific to PDRs.
Yeah.
Well, aren't most of the PDRs enforced or whatever by the land trust or by the state of New York?
The ones that the land trust holds, yes, they are responsible for those.
But the most recent one being the Purdy one, once that closes, that's actually the town of Canandaigua is responsible, holds the easement and is responsible for the enforcement of it.
Right.
Did we develop an agreement regarding that easement with the owner?
It's in process. I mean, it still hasn't gone to closing yet, but yeah, the Ag and Markets gives us very specific language. I mean, Sarah can talk to you about all the details, but essentially, short answer is yes.
Okay, so we're embarking on that in at least one area, whether it be ag land or whatever. But okay, so we're starting. We know our responsibilities in the future then, that we're going to have probably others that we're going to hold, easements that we'll hold. And so we need to have that process maybe clarified better.
Well, and we also have easements currently, for instance, like the, I can't remember, Terry, the name of it out by Laura Lane, the property.
Oh, yeah, Albright.
Albright, thank you.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
instance, the town owns that. And the easement, the monitoring is actually done by Finger Lakes Land Trust. So we have this weird combination of things that we still, I think Terry, you mentioned it, Joyce mentioned it. We really, the legislation for the conservation subdivision, I mean, in my opinion, that looks like that's pretty well ready. But now we have this next piece we have to figure out because we kind of have like a hodgepodge.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be beneficial for us to figure that out and have some clarity.
This map, I can tell you a little bit about this process. You can see all the orange are other conservation easements in the town of Victor. They've been doing this for a long time. And when they did the mapping project, what they had to figure out were, what do we want to know when you click on one of these? So it is very handy to have that. It's nice to have the book and page number, because then you can go to the county clerk and actually find, this easement, which I showed you. And the type, they have 3 types: most restrictive, least restrictive, and site specific. Sometimes it's a hybrid. There's a name that goes along with the description in the legal document, the size, the year, the name of it. I think that's just an ID number for the GIS thing. But you could also add, who holds the easement and who's responsible for monitoring. That would be interesting too. And you can even add, a little bit about the resource, right? Is this a farmland natural resource? I mean, you don't want to get too complicated, but you don't have that many. So what are the fields? That'd be the technical term to do this. And I think, MRB can give you a proposal to do that, set up this mapping. They certainly know your projects and proposals. I know from our experience, it took a little bit of sleuthing sometimes to find the correct deed and easement and the piece of paper. And some of those we had a hard time finding, I know, but maybe they were called different things, or maybe they weren't properly filed. I mean, things could have happened years ago where we couldn't really trace the paper trail. But this is the product. Now they have a KLM map. They can zoom in on Google Earth, and this is the they use Google Earth, which is pretty cool. And you can just jump in on that. If you want to see a demo of that, I can show you. But maybe you've used Google Earth before. But that, that's, the management, you're right, Doug, is critical. You can have the tools, but you have to have we've talked about this from when we did the natural resource inventory. This is great to have the resource, but now you need to have the management structure and the operations procedures to make it work well for you.
Joyce, do you remember the controversy on Fox Ridge?
Oh, I sure do.
I mean, how the hell that one got through?
I do not know. I do not know before my time, but I do know that it was pretty complicated by the time we got it.
Yeah.
So I have a question about potential areas for a conservation subdivision. Are those areas identified? I know we have the natural resource inventory, et cetera, different maps. We have tons of different maps. But would those areas be concentrated within a map like this? Does Victor do that in their area, or do you wait until someone purchases the land and then deal with it then, which seems to me to be somewhat after the fact? You're muted. You're muted, Barbara.
You're chicken or the egg here.
When we first started this project, we made a map of all the possible resources, but I don't think you can predict what what's going to come your way, you know, that's really, it's going to be up to the development process. But let me,
When an application comes in.
I think the comprehensive plan has been a guide about where we'd like to see development, especially, you know, multi-family residential or something like that, or even just single family. But I don't think that there's anything in code that says these are the places where we would like to see you build, and that's it.
I mean, on the one hand, you don't necessarily want people to build, you'd rather it stay open. So, you know,
That's what I-
really, a conservation subdivision's a trade-off in itself, you know, intrinsically, it's a trade-off.
Exactly. So we haven't gotten to that point. The town hasn't gotten to that point yet to say these are where we want you to develop, period.
You know, you'd rather all of these conservation areas, and you can see most of the town is, you know, this, we developed this early before we switched the tiers and things. I can, you know, tweak this to get better, but well, this is all based on soils and streams and natural resources. I don't think it did change. So you don't really want people to develop there, but if they do, you want them to preserve as much of these resources as possible. And that's really what a conservation subdivision is designed to do.
Yeah.
It's different from like the agricultural easements where you have really high priority areas that you want to conserve just straight out with an easement, you know, with no development. I mean, that would be the ultimate. I mean, if somebody wanted to come in and put easements on all your forested, you know, preserves and make a forest preserve in the town, sure, go for it. But, you know, you're going to have to compensate those landowners somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like on County Road 16 on the uplands there. There's a lot of ridgeline, you know, opportunities for easements and those kinds of things. But of course, that's very desirable. And how do we, you know, preserve what we've got there? Because that's the most desirable building lots in the town. It would be great. And I know that there are some pretty large parcels up there that it would be great if we got some kind of a, you know, easement on those before someone decided to put up a, you know, subdivision.
And the land trust, as you know, does that, but they obviously have strict criteria because it's time consuming to own and monitor easements, and they only pick those properties that meet their mission.
Mm-hmm.
If the town were into the business of holding easements, you could have different priorities, but you know, it is a commitment of time and resources to own and maintain and monitor easements.
Yeah, it's true.
And then Joyce, you just referenced a property near County Road 16, and this is similar to, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but this is similar to a conversation that Sarah and Gary and I had with the Agriculture Committee the other night. And they were talking about a property that was outside the strategic farmland protection area. And I said to them, well, wait a minute, we actually don't have anything that protects the strategic farmland protection area. So, you know, and again, when you're talking about priority areas, okay, so there's a piece that's not in the strategic farmland protection area. I understand the concern, but is that our immediate priority? Shouldn't a higher priority be doing something to protect the strategic farmland protection area and the strategic forest protection area? I mean, these are all conversations that are related that we haven't had at this point.
Yeah, it's very true.
More work to do. That's what I.
More work, absolutely. There's always something next.
You'll never get bored. So what are the next steps? I mean, if this document is ready to go, I understand it. You had an update this last week with the ordinance committee, right? And then the CIC needs to weigh in. Is that correct?
Well, I'll go out to the other committees from the ordinance committee to have them review it as we do with everything else. I was kind of hoping John and Bob would be attending today's meeting too, so they could get a good idea of what you presented, Barb. But I guess they weren't able to.
So Gary, in terms of next steps, I know that you want to talk about it, I think, one more time with the ordinance committee, right? So then
Definitely. Yeah.
maybe in time for the town board's July town board meeting, we could advance it to set a public hearing for August, perhaps, timeframe, ballpark. Does that sound about right?
I think that's basically what we had scheduled roughly that time.
Yeah, ordinance is looking at it on what, the 23rd?
23rd, yes.
Yeah.
And this YouTube will be available for the ones that missed it or on the ordinance committee to review before our ordinance meeting on the 23rd, I would hope. Is that true, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm usually able to do it within about a week.
Okay. Thanks.
Time
I see
is at
Chuck.
It's
23rd.
I
Chuck.
see Chuck just
Hello.
joined us.
Did you miss me?
We
Yes,
did.
we missed you.
Hey, Chuck.
Chuck, I'm
Gary?
sure was in the
Any thoughts,
project
Chuck?
review meeting.
Yeah, we knocked it off.
Before 11. Good for you.
I was rushing. I wanted to see you folks. So I'm sorry. Where are we? It sounds like we're ready to move this thing on to ordinance committee.
Just to recap, the only comments we got were from Tom, and a lot of them were very helpful. This reference wasn't clear, or this one was incorrect or inconsistent. We made some changes and tried to explain some of the computations a little better. And then we gave some examples of actual easements that are used in the town of Victor, and we can send along those for your models, but we didn't hear any other comments on the draft itself. So I was wondering if you had any other thoughts on the draft itself.
No, I think, as I said last meeting, I think the concerns I had regarding making sure that the conservation analysis component was done early on in the process, which I think we've accounted for. Obviously, making the process simpler. I know we can't make it simple, but we can make it simpler for both
Hopefully it's clear if it's not simple.
right,
Yes, yes.
for both the applicant and the planning board members. So that I think we're on our way to that. So that was really that was my only concerns, and I think we pretty well handled them. So I think it's as far as I'm concerned, we're ready to run up the flagpole.
Good to hear. And as far as like testing it on a project, you know, every site is so different. I think no matter which place you pick, it's going to be so unique. You know, the next one will be so different. I'm not sure there's a lot of value in that exercise beyond the concept work that we already did, you know, in a previous meeting. So,
Mhm.
So yeah, I think we're to the point now. We're talking about the next steps. Ordinance committee on the 23rd, and then the town board meeting in July to set a public hearing for August. That's where we left off.
Okay.
What time is the meeting on the 23rd? Gary,
9 o'clock.
9?
Yes.
Is that gonna be by Zoom or by?
No, we're going to, well, both. I mean, we're available. It's available for us to meet at town hall in our usual room, I believe, right, Doug?
Yeah, and Kim Burkhardt and I are gonna make sure that it's set up that you can meet in person and still be be available for Zoom too at the same time.
Okay.
I've got some new technology tools that are supposed to be arriving today from Amazon that hopefully will make it better for the hybrid users. So we'll
Yeah.
play with that a little. So
Yeah, Kim and I are gonna do a test run too. So Doug, maybe after we get that stuff set up, then she and I can play with it by the end of the week and see how it goes.
I think this hybrid is going to be a new
Yeah.
normal for us. We thought the Zoom meetings were complicated. Now we have to do both at once. And it's like, okay. That's June 23rd, and then hopefully, you know, that'll go well in the town board meeting in July to set the public hearing for their August meeting. Any other steps? County Planning Board referral, will the town handle all that?
Seeker?
Seeker?
yeah, we'll take care of all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
stuff. We'll throw Shauna into the fire now. I see she's joined us and she can spearhead all that. So Shauna and Chuck were both in our project review committee meeting, our PRC meeting this morning. So reviewing projects. So
That's what you do.
No conservation subdivisions, thank goodness.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not
good.
this time. I know you have some very attentive residents. So, it's always good to have that engagement, but, you got to definitely be very clear about what you're doing and what your priorities are and how it works and, what the tools are. So you're doing a good job with that.
So Doug, moving forward, if ordinance, it comes out of ordinance on the 23rd, then you'd set a hearing in July you would set the hearing in July for the hearing to be in August?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
That's generally the idea here. We were talking right before you joined us, Chuck, we were talking, there might be some things in terms of some more work for us to do in terms of identification of these easements and the language and how we do this and assist you guys with the planning board and stuff. We can certainly talk about that. That's I guess next step, a next piece to this. The legislation is kind of, it sounds like generally ready and for feedback at this point. So.
Yeah, I guess one of the details it came up with the review of the Morel application was the open space that is created, who maintains it. If the town doesn't want it, if that's going to be the town's policy, then it sort of flips to the HOA or a trust. And some of the planning board members were concerned, including myself, that you're putting a big burden on the HOA in terms of maintaining that property and for land that's being used by the general public to trump through. So I guess that's something we have to address, I don't know, with each application, or if it's a general statement that we can talk about overriding the whole issue.
Yeah.
Oh, Chuck, you hit the nail on the head. That's kind of along the lines of the conversation we were having, and even the enforcement and the monitoring of our existing conservation easements and then going forward. We have to figure that piece out. I know you and I shared with them, you had asked me in the past about whether or not the town was willing to hold conservation easements. And my response to you was kind of, I felt like that ship had sailed that once we started down the road of the PDRs in terms of the agriculture piece. But then there's variations like this one that we're talking about that we've got to figure out. So.
Yep.
Yeah, it's different when the land is going to be open to the public, rather than just like stormwater management or private, for trails for the residents. Now the town has more of an active interest in it, and maybe makes more sense for the town to hold it and monitor it. But those things all need to be spelled out in the development plan, which becomes part of the approval, which becomes, part of the easement ultimately.
And I think we left in the component about the 15% bonus in density if you public sewer and water and provide public land, right?
Yes, we did early on to, give that incentive.
So we're inviting people to provide access to the public, but we got to see how it's going to be maintained.
Right.
Well, that access to the public was one of the key pieces that allowed them to get that 15% bonus.
Oh, yeah.
So that has to be exactly what the language is. I don't know, but I mean, that does have to be maintained in that easement, so who does the actual maintenance? That's got to be clearly spelled out so that the potential homeowners, the people that are going to buy into that, are well aware of it up front. So,
I think in that case, it was said that we'll grant the easement across the property to the public and the HOA will maintain it. I mean, easier said than done. And I think that was the concern of the planning board, that really wasn't tied down before the density increase was granted.
Well, didn't Morel, when they made your presentation, indicate that there was like two different types of HOAs? One was much more rigid than the other.
Right, because with Lakewood Meadows, trails were being done away with, and we didn't want to get into a situation in this project, the newer project, that at some point the HOA just says, we're not going to maintain them anymore and we're going to let them overgrow and they go away. And you just want to make sure that can't happen. And you're right. You're right, Gary. There's two different types of HOAs. One's is more strict or more hard line.
Trails Lakewood Meadows seem to be in pretty good shape, really, from what I can see.
Yeah, they've been in on the Chatham roadside to ask if trails could be abandoned, especially in the back of their properties. And they said that we just, don't see any reason to use them anymore. And can we abandon them? So they had to get approval from us, but they had a good justification for it.
Well, Chuck, we did view a couple of management plans that Victor holds, and I thought it was pretty interesting because of the kinds of detail that they went into those management plans. It might be, maybe Barb, you could send us one or two, maybe just to Chuck, and I'm sure Sean has already seen things like that. But just so that you get an idea of what you can put in and what is normal, you know what I'm saying? So that it's a contract, it's a legal contract with the HOA. And I think they have to assume, and then there's consequences if it doesn't happen. And, all these things are spelled out in that management plan. And I thought it was interesting to see a couple of them to see how detailed they did get.
Yeah, the key is not just the content, but also when it's submitted. Because I know with that application over on Bristol, that small conservation subdivision, we would not sign the plans until the land management plan was received, approved by Chris, and I think recorded, or it was recorded with the plan, I guess.
Yeah, on your conditions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The legal recording of the deed is the last step, obviously, but all of the content of what goes into the easement needs to be part of the record of approval.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will send those 3 examples that I thought were the best, most representative to Sarah to distribute to the committee. So you can have those, little map of where it is and the actual filed easement itself. So you can use them as models as you like.
Okay.
Let me ask the team a question kind of along the same lines. I mean, I feel like, we had hired Barb to help us with drafting the legislation, which she definitely has done. And you've gone above and beyond, Barb, in my opinion. Thank you so much for everything, all your help. But we kind of have some work, I feel like, ourselves to figure out kind of going forward. And truthfully, I think one of the, maybe we even need to have a conversation with the town attorney. Maybe we need to include the town clerk who actually records these, because I also see on the other side, sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect. By the time it all gets done, I'm actually trying to hunt one down this morning that's just beating my head against a wall because, we have some work to do, I feel like still. Would you like to continue to meet and kind of focus on that next step now? Or do you want to say, okay, our work is done, town, figure it out? What's everybody's, help me, where's everybody's head at, I guess?
Well, I think conservation subdivision was part of what the conservation easement team was going to, kind of be responsible for. So I'm thinking that the subdivision design is a part of it that we have that we have agreed we're going to send on. So now the conservation easement team is not ended. That's my interpretation of what the CIC was intending anyway. And so that we have other questions about conservation easements that we have to attend to, that we can formulate and advise, in a next step kind of process. So I'm saying let's just do what we have to do with conservation easements, because we're going to have to tackle it. Somebody's going to have to tackle it.
Tom, any thoughts? You've been very passionate about conservation easements over the years.
Right.
I don't, I'm trying to see whether we need to involve Barb anymore. I think I think we've got enough right-thinking people involved, and with Chris's involvement, I think we, the town and the conservation team, or whatever the hell we call themselves, can continue to work with this. I mean, this conservation easements are not something that just started yesterday. There's a lot of references and whatever. We can handle it. When I say we, the town certainly can handle. It's not like we've got a hell of a lot of them.
Yeah.
To be honest, I've shared what I know, these are the tools, and the rest of it really is, like we talked about in the natural resource inventory workshop. We want to get all these people who have roles to understand where they fit, what their responsibilities are, and how can you all work better to make a better process. And there's no framework for that you can just do. You have to figure it out, and you have to get everybody on the same page. So, I think you're on the right track, and I, encourage you to do that, but I don't, I'm not an expert in processes. I've got the tools and more of an expert in your own town's resources and why they're important, but how are you going to get the nuts and bolts of the process to work? There's no shortcut to that. And I don't think I really, other people can help you more than me.
I think now that I think that's the planning piece, the planning professional that will help the conservation easement team move forward with their next project, which is the process.
There's been some discussion about, open easement or open access to conservation easements, or whether they're private easements for only the homeowners association. I will tell you that 99% of property buyers, when they go buy a house, they do not read the offering plan. They do not know who's got access or doesn't have access to the common property, or who's going to maintain it and what expense and so on. So it's really up to the town to decide what we think is most appropriate, because the homeowners in a homeowners association and the offering plans, nobody reads them, much less understands them. So it's the town's burden.
It sounds to me like the team needs to continue to identify areas where we need help, if we need help in them. Maybe just discussion, maybe involving other town members, but I think we should leave open the idea of perhaps having to seek help outside if we come up with a question or a area where we need additional help.
Yeah, if we need it, sure.
Yeah, only if we need it. Right, I agree.
Right.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Agreed. And I think the town planner, a perfect person to help us with this next phase and become familiar with it, and the crossover with all the boards. And Sean, I can't wait for you to take the lead on this. So
you came at the right time.
All right, sounds like a plan. So, Sarah, I believe you have the latest version, and I'll just repackage it. Well, this says not draft anymore, but basically approved by the, what exactly is this committee called again?
So officially, this is the Conservation Easement Project Team. But we kind of started calling it the Conservation Subdivision Group because that's all we've been working on for the past year and a half.
Yeah.
All right.
But yes, Conservation Easement Project Team. On paper, that's what it's called.
Okay. I just want to get the footers correct in the final report.
hey, Barb, in your and I can always shoot you an email, but are you gonna like do a separate legislative piece that you're forwarding to us, or the information that you've already sent us? I mean, it's essentially the draft code. It looks like we'll just have to, put it in our formatting. It looks like essentially.
Yes, and you're more familiar with that than me. You have the Word document. You can just, cut and paste that into your local law. That's.
Well, thank you for all your help. I mean, seriously, it's been well over a year. I know this took a lot longer than we originally expected. And
Yeah.
part of that we can blame on COVID. Part of it we have to take some responsibility for, I think. So,
Well, there's blips over the winter, and I'm glad we got back going and, really focused in on it. And I think it's a good product. So I hope it works well for you.
Yeah, can't wait to try it out.
Mhm.
I think.
Thank you
We're
very
look-
much.
We're looking at you, Chuck.
Yeah, right.
Uh-oh.
Good luck.
We'll be following you, Chuck, and your board.
I've got more ammunition now, much better than I had before. I appreciate it.
That's good.
Good. Wish you the best. And as always, if there's any questions or, where did we come up with that? If you ever have any questions about it, I'm always happy to, discuss it. And I'm always, of course, interested in how it's working. So, I'm always happy to entertain any questions or comments or feedback, as you find it, as you use it and apply the tool in the future. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb.
Barb, thank you.
Yes, thanks again.
All right. I'll
See, I
turn it back
see
to the
tomorrow
town to end.
morning
Yeah, see you tomorrow morning.
in person.
Oh, you're gonna go in person? Oh.
Yeah,
Ooh.
you were on vacation, Joyce, but you'll see the email that CIC is invited to be in person if you all want to be.
Oh, wow.
Or by Zoom, your choice, whatever everybody's comfortable with.
To ask, do we have coffee and donuts in person?
I think so.
If
There
you
was
bring-
discussion about that.
We were trying to figure that out, so.
And it means you need to get dressed before noon.
That's right. Might have to get out of my pajamas.
If you bring a shot record.
Ah,
All right. Well,
Thanks,
thank you,
all.
everyone. Thank
See
you
ya.
again, Barbara.
see you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
And
Thanks,
now.
Barb.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.